My name is Cora Hayes, and for the last 7 years, my life has been a quiet study in contrasts. To my family, I was a wilting branch on a proud, old tree, a daughter who had inexplicably turned her back on the fertile soil of our shared legacy. To the handful of people who truly knew me, and to the silent world of code and algorithms where I truly lived, I was the architect of a nascent universe, a world built of light and data that was poised to reshape the future. My personal background is woven into the very fabric of Seattle, a city of glass towers and evergreen ghosts. The Hayes are a name synonymous with legacy holdings, a real estate empire my great-grandfather founded, carving out prime parcels of the city when it was still a rugged port town. Our history was measured in square footage and property portfolios, our family gatherings less about connection and more about the ceremonial reading of market reports. My father, Arthur Hayes, was the patriarch in every sense of the word, a man whose love was as solid and conditional as the foundations of the skyscrapers he built. My mother, Margaret, was the graceful diplomat, her life dedicated to smoothing the sharp corners of our family's ambition. And then there were my older siblings, Ethan and Isabel, the polished, perfect heirs to the Hayes throne. They had followed the blueprint with unerring precision. Ethan, with his sharp suits and sharper smile, managed the commercial acquisitions. Isabel, effortlessly elegant, curated the luxury residential division, her name a brand in itself among the city's elite. They were the twin pillars of Hayes Legacy Holdings, their success a constant, gleaming reproach to my own choices. Because I had chosen differently. I had seen a future not in land or concrete, but in the invisible currents of information that connected the world. After graduating with a degree in computer science, I had respectfully declined the vice president title my father had created for me at Hayes Legacy. I didn't want a sinecure, a gilded cage designed to keep the artistic daughter safely within the family fold. I wanted to build something of my own. I started a company. Lumensphere. The name came to me one rainy evening, watching the city lights fracture through my apartment window, thinking about the spheres of influence, data, and human connection I wanted to create. In the beginning, it was just me in a cramped apartment in Fremont, fueled by cheap coffee and a burning, unwavering belief in an idea. An idea my family summarily dismissed. A little software project, my father had mused, his disappointment a heavy cloak in the room. Cora, your talents could be used to manage billion-dollar assets. Don't waste them on digital hobbies. Ethan had been more direct. The market's saturated, Corey. You'll burn through your savings and come running back in a year. The door's always open, but don't expect us to fund your little fantasy. Isabel's disapproval was quieter, but it stung the most. She would look at my simple, functional clothes, my second-hand car, my small apartment, with a kind of gentle pity that was more insulting than any mockery. She saw my life not as a choice, but as a failure to achieve the standard of living she considered a birthright. For 7 years, I let them believe it. I let them think I was struggling. Every conversation was a delicate dance around my perceived failures. They saw my frugality and called it poverty. They saw my intense focus and called it obsession. They saw my deliberate, quiet life and called it a pale shadow of the vibrant, public success they enjoyed. They had no idea that my frugality was strategic, that every dollar I saved was another server purchased, another brilliant mind hired. They didn't know that my little software project had evolved, moving from a Fremont apartment to a modest office, and then to a sprawling, innovative campus hidden away in the green hills outside the city. They didn't know that while they were closing deals on buildings, I was closing deals on the future of artificial intelligence and sustainable data management. They didn't know that the anonymous, enigmatic founder of Lumensphere, the tech visionary celebrated in hushed tones on Wall Street and in Silicon Valley, was their own quiet, disappointing daughter. My life was a carefully constructed secret. A secret I had guarded not out of shame, but out of necessity. My vision was fragile in its early stages, and I knew, with absolute certainty, that my father's brand of help would have been to take control, to mold my creation into something he understood, something that fit the Hayes portfolio. He would have suffocated it with the weight of his legacy. So I protected it. I built my world in silence, finding a different kind of family in the team of engineers and dreamers who shared my vision. Now, as I drove my aging but beloved Subaru Outback along the winding coastal road toward Greywood, our family's ancestral estate on the Puget Sound, I knew the time for silence was over. The annual summer gala was a Hayes institution, a command performance. For years, I had attended with a sense of quiet dread, bracing myself for the familiar chorus of condescending questions and well-meaning but painful advice. But this year was different. A few days ago, my father had called. His voice, usually so full of booming confidence, had carried a faint tremor of concern. Hayes Legacy Holdings, the unshakable titan, was facing headwinds. A series of market downturns and a few overly ambitious projects, championed by Ethan, had left the company vulnerable. My father, ever the proud patriarch, was looking for solutions, and his gaze had once again fallen on me. He wanted me to come home, to finally accept my rightful place. I watched the familiar landscape unfold. The dense green of the pines, the steely gray of the water, the sky a soft, forgiving blanket of clouds. The air smelled of salt and rain and memory. This place was in my bones, as much a part of me as the family I was about to confront. But I was no longer the lost girl they thought they knew. I had built my own foundation, not of concrete, but of code. And tonight, I was going to show them the world I had created. Not with anger or with triumph, but with the quiet, unshakable truth of my own becoming. I was going home, not to capitulate, but to finally be seen. Greywood greeted me not with the warmth of a home, but with the imposing grandeur of a monument. The old stone house, covered in ivy that had been meticulously manicured for generations, stood on a bluff overlooking the Sound. Its large windows were like impassive eyes, staring out at the water, holding a century of Hayes family secrets within their panes. The circular driveway was already lined with the gleaming chrome and polished lacquer of expensive cars: Ethan's Porsche, Isabel's Range Rover, and the various Mercedes and BMWs of my parents' friends. I found a small space for my Subaru under the shade of a sprawling cedar tree, its dusty exterior and practical roof rack a humble counterpoint to the surrounding luxury. For a moment, I sat in the driver's seat, the engine ticking as it cooled, and gathered myself. The scent of pine from the car's air freshener mingled with the salt-laced breeze drifting through my open window. It was a smell of freedom, a scent from my own, self-made life. Taking a deep breath, I stepped out. My simple, elegant navy blue dress felt like a second skin, a quiet assertion of my own style amidst the expected sea of designer labels. I walked up the stone steps, my sensible heels making a soft, solitary sound. The front door swung open before I could reach it. Ethan stood there, a crystal tumbler of whiskey in his hand, his smile perfectly white and utterly devoid of warmth. "Look what the tide washed in," he said, his voice carrying the easy, practiced charm he used in boardrooms. "Corey, you made it. We were about to send a search party." "I wouldn't want to be a bother," I replied, my voice calm and even. I stepped past him into the grand foyer, a space designed to intimidate, with its soaring ceilings, marble floors, and a portrait of my great-grandfather glowering down from above the massive stone fireplace. The air was thick with the scent of expensive perfume and the low hum of polite, powerful conversation. Isabel emerged from the living room, a vision in cream silk. She kissed the air beside my cheek, her eyes doing a quick, dismissive scan of my attire. "Cora, darling. It's so good to see you. That's a sweet dress." The word sweet was her code for inadequate. "You know," she added, linking her arm through mine and steering me toward the crowd, "I have a stylist who could do wonders for you. Just to help you build a wardrobe that reflects your position." "What position is that?" I asked gently, freeing my arm. She gave a little laugh, as if I'd told a charming joke. "Well, a Hayes, of course." The implication was clear. I wasn't living up to the brand. For years, these little barbs had felt like tiny needles, each one a painful reminder of the chasm between their expectations and my reality. But tonight, they felt different. They were like arrows falling short, unable to pierce the quiet armor of self-assurance I had spent years forging. My mother found me then, her expression a familiar blend of love and anxiety. "There you are, my love," she whispered, wrapping me in a genuine hug. "Your father is looking for you. He's in his study with a few of the board members." She lowered her voice further. "He's stressed, Cora. Be gentle with him." "I'm always gentle, Mom," I said, and I meant it. My mission tonight wasn't to cause pain, but to end the long, painful misunderstanding that had defined my relationship with them. I found my father in his mahogany-paneled study, a room that smelled of old leather and cigar smoke. He was standing with two other men, their faces grim, a set of architectural plans spread across his massive desk. He looked up as I entered, and his face softened for a moment. "Cora." "Princess," he said, his voice a low rumble. He dismissed his colleagues with a nod, and they filed out, giving me curious glances. "Come in. We need to talk." He gestured to one of the leather armchairs, but I remained standing, choosing to look out the window at the twilight settling over the Sound. The water was calm, a sheet of hammered silver under the fading light. "I've been looking at the company's quarterly reports," I began, my voice soft. "The downtown waterfront project seems to be overleveraged." His face tightened. "Ethan is ambitious. It's a bold play, and bold plays are what built this family's fortune." "Bold plays require foresight, Dad," I countered gently. "The market is shifting. People aren't just looking for luxury anymore. They're looking for sustainability, for community, for smarter design. The old models are becoming obsolete." He sighed, running a hand through his perfectly coiffed silver hair. It was a gesture of profound weariness, and a pang of sympathy went through me. I loved this man, for all his blindness. "This is why I need you," he said, his voice losing its corporate bluster and taking on the tone of a father speaking to his child. "You have a good head on your shoulders, even if you've been distracted. I've created a new position. Chief Innovation Officer. It's yours. You can work with Ethan, guide him. You can help us modernize. It's time to come home, Cora. This Lumensphere hobby has gone on long enough." The word hung in the air between us. Hobby. All the years of quiet dismissal, of patronizing smiles and gentle pity, coalesced in that single word. It wasn't spoken with malice, but with a deep, unshakable, and profoundly insulting ignorance. He saw my life's work, the passion that had consumed me, the empire I had built in secret, as a mere pastime. This was the moment. The pivot point I had been waiting for. I turned from the window, my gaze meeting his directly. My heart wasn't pounding with anger, but with a strange, sad clarity. The time for hiding was over. The time for protecting their feelings at the expense of my own truth was done. "My work isn't a hobby, Dad," I said, my voice steady and clear, imbued with a quiet authority he had never heard from me before. "It's the future. And as it happens, I've been thinking a lot about the future of Hayes Legacy Holdings as well." He looked at me, a flicker of confusion in his eyes. "Good. Then you'll take the job." "That's not what I mean," I said. I pulled out my phone. It felt strangely anticlimactic, this small, glowing rectangle that held the power to append their entire world. I navigated to a secure email I had received an hour earlier. A confirmation. Ethan and Isabel had drifted into the study, drawn by the serious tone of our conversation. They stood by the door, watching, their expressions a mixture of curiosity and condescension. "What's going on?" Ethan asked, glancing from my face to my father's. "Is Corey finally agreeing to get a real job?" I ignored him, my focus entirely on my father. "Hayes Legacy is in a more precarious position than you're letting on," I stated, not as a question, but as a fact. "The debt from the waterfront project, the declining value of your commercial retail spaces, the company is overextended and vulnerable to a hostile takeover." My father's face went pale. "How could you possibly know the details of?" "Because I've been doing my due diligence," I interrupted softly. "For the past 6 months, my team has been analyzing your assets, your liabilities, your place in the market. We've been modeling the future, and the future for Hayes Legacy on its current path is not bright. Your team. Isabel scoffed, stepping forward. What team? The two kids in your rented office space. A small, sad smile touched my lips. I looked from her face to Ethan's, and then back to my father. Dad, I said, my voice gentle but firm. Yesterday, an anonymous investment group made a significant purchase of your publicly traded debt. Enough to give them controlling leverage. This morning, that group tendered a formal acquisition offer to the board of directors. My father stared at me, his mind clearly racing, trying to figure out which of his rivals could have orchestrated such a move. Who? Was it Blackwood? Peterson Global. No, I said, laying my phone on his desk, the screen glowing with the official press release that was scheduled to go live in 5 minutes. It wasn't them. He leaned forward, his eyes scanning the text. I watched as the color drained from his face, his confident posture crumbling as he read the words. He looked up at me, his expression one of pure, uncomprehending shock. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. Ethan, impatient, snatched the phone. He read the headline aloud, his voice dripping with disbelief. Lumensphere Holdings acquires controlling interest in Hayes Legacy Holdings. He looked up, his face a mask of confusion. Lumensphere? Your company? This is a joke. It has to be a prank. Lumensphere is valued at over $20 billion, Ethan, I said quietly, the number falling into the silent room with impossible weight. We've become the global leader in sustainable AI-driven infrastructure management. The systems that are quietly revolutionizing energy grids, logistics networks, and urban planning in 20 countries? That's our work. My work. Isabel let out a choked laugh. 20 billion? Cora, your car is worth less than my handbag. This is insane. The car is practical. It gets me from A to B, I said, echoing the same simple defense I'd used for years, but this time it was imbued with a different meaning. I chose to reinvest my capital. I chose to build something that mattered more to me than luxury cars or designer handbags. My father finally found his voice, a strangled whisper. You're the one? The anonymous founder? The media has been they call you a visionary, a recluse. I needed privacy, I explained, my gaze sweeping over all of them, the family I loved, the family that had never once seen me for who I was. I needed the space to build my vision without interference. I needed to protect it from being co-opted, from being changed into something it wasn't meant to be. My eyes met his. I needed to protect it from you, Dad. The accusation, though softly spoken, landed with the force of a physical blow. He staggered back, sinking into his leather chair as if his legs could no longer support him. The silence that followed was profound, deeper than any I had ever experienced in this house. It was the sound of a world shifting on its axis, of a family's entire perception of reality being shattered in an instant. Outside, the party continued, the distant sound of laughter and clinking glasses a surreal backdrop to the silent demolition of the Hayes family hierarchy. Ethan was the first to break, his face contorted in a snarl of anger and betrayal. You did this behind our backs? You bought our own family's company out from under us. No, Ethan, I corrected him, my voice filled with a quiet sadness rather than triumph. I saved it. Hayes' legacy was bleeding, and you were all too proud to see it. I didn't initiate a hostile takeover. I made a generous offer, an offer the board accepted because it was the only viable path forward. I am not your enemy. I am your new majority shareholder. I looked at my mother, who had appeared in the doorway, her face a canvas of confusion and fear. I walked over to her, taking her cold hands in mine. I did this to protect our legacy, Mom, I said softly. Not just the legacy of buildings and land, but the legacy of this family. It was time for a new vision. She looked at me, really looked at me, perhaps for the first time since I was a child with dreams she couldn't quite comprehend. In her eyes, I saw the dawn of a terrifying, brilliant new understanding. My little girl, her expression seemed to say, the one we pitted, the one we tried to fix was the most powerful one of us all. The aftermath of the revelation was not a storm, but a profound and unsettling quiet. The sounds of the party outside seemed to belong to another world, a life that was no longer ours. In the mahogany-scented silence of my father's study, we stood as strangers, the familiar constellation of our family suddenly and irrevocably reconfigured. My father sat slumped in his chair, staring at the press release on my phone as if it were written in an alien language. He had aged a decade in 10 minutes. The booming patriarch was gone, replaced by a bewildered old man. Isabel had sunk onto a small sofa, her perfect composure shattered, her hand covering her mouth. Ethan, however, was vibrating with a furious, wounded energy. "I don't believe you," he finally spat, his voice low and venomous. "This is some kind of elaborate bluff. You hired actors. Forged documents. You think you can just walk in here and—" "The funds were transferred this afternoon, Ethan," I said calmly, my voice cutting through his tirade. 70% of the purchase was made in cash. The rest was a stock transfer that the board eagerly accepted. Lumensphere stock is, shall we say, a more stable asset than Hayes' legacy at the moment. I retrieved my phone from the desk. The official announcement goes public in less than a minute. Your bankers, your board members, your partners, they will all know the truth. As if on cue, Isabel's phone, lying on the table beside her, buzzed. Then Ethan's. Then my father's. A chorus of notifications, each one a digital confirmation of the new reality. Isabel picked hers up with a trembling hand, her eyes scanning the screen. She looked up at me, her own eyes wide with a dawning horror. It's everywhere," she whispered. The Wall Street Journal. Bloomberg. Tech visionary Cora Hayes, founder of Lumensphere, engineers acquisition of family real estate empire. She read the headline as if it were her own obituary. They're calling it a landmark fusion of old-world assets and new-world innovation. Ethan grabbed his own phone, his face turning a blotchy red as he scrolled. "How?" he demanded, looking at me with a raw mix of fury and envy. "How did you build all this without any of us knowing? Where did the money come from?" "It came from the same place it always does," I replied, my gaze soft. "An idea. And the discipline to see it through." I walked over to the window, looking out at the dark water of the Sound. "Remember when I presented my initial concept for a neural network to manage urban resources to the Hayes board? I was 24. I asked for a small seed investment. I turned back to face them. Dad, you called it imaginative but impractical. Isabel, you said it was a bit too niche. And Ethan, I met his furious gaze, you laughed. You said I should stick to designing websites." The memory hung in the air, sharp and clear. I didn't voice it as an accusation, but as a simple statement of fact. It was the root of everything that had happened since. Their dismissal had been the flint that sparked my fire. "That rejection was the greatest gift you ever gave me," I continued, my voice reflective. "It forced me to be self-reliant. It taught me that my vision was my own, and I would have to be the one to protect it. So I found other investors. People who saw what you couldn't see. I lived frugally, not because I was poor, but because every dollar was precious. Every penny went back into research, into development, into hiring the most brilliant people I could find." My mother, who had been standing silently in the doorway, finally spoke. Her voice was thin, fragile. "Your apartment, Cora, that tiny little place all those years. It was all I needed, Mom," I said gently. "My real home was the world I was building. While you were all worrying about whether I could afford a new car, I was creating a company that would soon be able to buy the entire Hayes legacy portfolio 10 times over." A strangled sound came from my father. He finally looked up, his eyes filled not with anger, but with a profound, soul-crushing regret. "Why, Cora? Why the secrecy? Why couldn't you just tell us?" This was the heart of it all. The question that deserved an honest answer. "Would you have listened?" I asked, my own voice thick with the emotion I had suppressed for so long. "Or would you have tried to take over? Would you have patted me on the head and said, 'That's a nice idea, princess, now let your father and brother handle the business side of it'? You love me, Dad. I have never doubted your love. But you have never, not once, respected my mind. You saw a daughter to be protected, not an equal to be trusted. My secrecy wasn't about deceiving you, it was about survival. It was the only way I could become myself, free from the crushing weight of your expectations. The truth of my words settled over the room, undeniable and devastating. The silence stretched, filled only by the sound of my father's ragged breathing. Finally, I walked to his desk and picked up the set of architectural plans for the troubled waterfront project. I studied them for a moment, my mind instantly seeing the flaws, the inefficiencies, but also the potential. This project isn't a failure, I said, looking at Ethan. It's just incomplete. Your vision was limited by the tools you were using. I turned to my father. The acquisition isn't about dismantling your legacy. It's about ensuring it has a future. Lumensphere's technology can make these buildings self-sustaining. We can integrate smart grids, optimize resource usage, create a truly connected community. We can turn a high-risk liability into a model for the future of urban living. I was no longer just their daughter or their sister. I was a leader, a strategist, a CEO outlining a vision. Tomorrow morning, I said, my voice now crisp and professional, I will be holding a meeting at the Hayes Legacy offices. I expect you all to be there. We have a lot of work to do. Work for you. Ethan scoffed, though the insult lacked its earlier conviction. Work with me, I corrected him gently but firmly. I am not here to fire you. I am here to lead. Hayes Legacy Holdings is now a subsidiary of Lumensphere. Your roles will change. Your responsibilities will be redefined. You will have to learn a new way of doing business, a way that is transparent, innovative, and collaborative. I paused, letting the weight of my words sink in. You will have to earn your place in this new company, just as I earned my place in the world. I looked at each of them in turn, my stunned father, my shaken sister, my furious brother, my heartbroken mother. I felt no triumph, no desire for revenge. Only a deep, aching sadness for the years we had lost, and a fragile, burgeoning hope for the future. I'm not the person you thought I was, I said, my voice softening once more. The question is, can you learn to see the person I've become? Can you let go of the daughter you thought you had and get to know the woman who is standing in front of you? Without waiting for an answer, I turned and walked out of the study, leaving them in the ruins of their old world. I moved through the party, a ghost in their midst. No one noticed the quiet daughter, the family disappointment. No one knew that the foundations of their world had just been fundamentally altered. I didn't stop to say goodbye. I walked out the great front door, down the stone steps, and back to my old Subaru. As I started the engine, the simple, familiar rumble was the most reassuring sound in the world. It was the sound of my life. My choices. My freedom. I drove away from Greywood, the grand house shrinking in my rearview mirror, its lighted windows like fading stars. I wasn't running away. For the first time, I was driving toward a home that was entirely my own, leaving the door open behind me, hoping, with all my heart, that my family would one day be brave enough to walk through it. The following morning, the sun rose over Seattle, casting a soft, pearlescent light on the glass and steel of the city. My apartment, usually a sanctuary of quiet focus, felt different. The silence was not one of solitude, but of anticipation. I stood by the large window, a mug of black coffee warming my hands, and watched the city wake up. My city. In a way, it felt like it truly was mine now, not as a possession, but as a responsibility. I dressed with care, not in the power suits favored by my sister, but in my own version of authority, simple, well-made trousers, a silk blouse, and a blazer. My uniform was one of quiet confidence, not aggressive assertion. The woman looking back at me from the mirror was the same one who had driven to Greywood the night before, yet everything had changed. The secret I had carried for so long was finally out in the open, and I felt not burdened, but lighter. The weight of their misunderstanding had been lifted, replaced by the heavy, but hopeful, task of building a new understanding. The Hayes Legacy Holdings building was a monument to my father's aesthetic, a soaring tower of dark glass and granite, imposing and powerful. It was a building that declared its importance to the skyline. As I walked into the lobby, I felt a wave of nostalgia. I had run through these halls as a child, playing hide-and-seek behind the massive marble pillars. I had interned here during college summers, filing paperwork and feeling like a cog in a machine I didn't understand. Now, I was here to reinvent the machine itself. The receptionist, a woman who had worked for my father for 20 years, looked up as I approached. Her eyes widened in recognition, not of Cora Hayes, the quiet daughter, but of the face that was now plastered across every financial news site on the internet. Miss Hayes, I mean MS. Hayes, she stammered. Good morning. Your family is waiting for you in the main conference room. Thank you, Martha, I said with a warm smile, hoping to put her at ease. It's good to see you. The walk to the conference room was a strange journey through my own past. Employees peeked out of their offices, their faces a mixture of curiosity, awe, and apprehension. They were whispering. I was no longer just the boss's daughter. I was the new boss. I paused outside the heavy oak doors of the conference room, taking a final, centering breath. This was not a battlefield. It was a construction site. And we were about to break ground. I entered. They were all there, seated around the enormous, polished table where I had witnessed so many of my father's triumphs and Ethan's confident presentations. My father was at the head of the table, his customary seat, though he looked out of place in it now, diminished. Ethan sat to his right, his arms crossed, his jaw tight. Isabel was on his left, her face pale and drawn, her usual impeccable makeup unable to hide the sleepless night in her eyes. My mother was there too, seated slightly away from the table, a silent observer, her presence a plea for peace. I chose not to take the seat opposite my father, the traditional seat of a challenger. Instead, I remained standing, moving to the side of the room where a large screen was mounted on the wall. I connected my tablet and the LumenSphere logo as stylized, glowing orb illuminated the room. Good morning, I began, my voice calm and steady. Thank you for being here. I know that the events of last night were a shock. My intention was never to cause pain, but to create a necessary change. Today is not about looking back. It's about looking forward. I clicked to the next slide, which showed an organizational chart. It was not a hierarchy, but a network, a web of interconnected teams. Hayes Legacy Holdings is a company with a proud history and incredible assets, I continued. But its structure is antiquated. It's a top-down pyramid, slow to adapt, resistant to change. That ends today. We are going to restructure. We are going to become agile, collaborative, and forward-thinking. Ethan snorted. You're going to replace us with a bunch of coders from your campus? No, Ethan, I said, meeting his gaze without hostility. I'm going to integrate us. Your knowledge of this market is invaluable. Isabel's understanding of the luxury client base is essential. Dad's experience is the foundation we're building on. But knowledge without innovation is a museum piece. It's beautiful to look at, but it doesn't grow. I laid out my vision. I spoke not of hostile takeovers, but of synergy. I explained how LumenSphere's AI could analyze market trends with a precision that human intuition could never match, identifying opportunities and mitigating risks before they became crises. I showed them how our sustainable building technologies could not only save the waterfront project, but make it the most profitable and celebrated development in the company's history. I painted a picture of a future where Hayes Legacy didn't just build buildings, but created intelligent, living environments. I spoke for an hour, my passion for the work infusing every word. I was not lecturing them, I was inviting them. I was opening the door to the world I had built and asking them to step inside. When I finished, the room was silent. My father was looking at his hands, folded on the table before him. Isabel seemed to be considering my words, a flicker of something perhaps grudging respect in her eyes. Ethan's expression was still guarded, but the hard anger had been replaced by a grudging curiosity. You've thought this all through, my father said, his voice raspy. It was not a question. For 7 years, Dad, I replied softly. This has been my entire life. So, what do you want from us? Isabel asked, her voice quiet. What are our new roles in this grand vision? I want you to learn, I said simply. I want you to be open. I'm assigning a team from LumenSphere to work with each of you. Not to supervise you, but to collaborate with you. Ethan, you'll work with our head of predictive analytics. You'll see how data can sharpen your ambition, not just replace it. Isabel, you'll partner with our user experience design team. You'll learn that luxury is no longer just about materials, it's about creating seamless, intuitive living experiences. And Dad, I turned to him, I want you to be our senior advisor. I want your wisdom. I want your guidance. But I need you to trust my vision. It was an offer of peace. An offer of partnership. It was a bridge across the chasm that had separated us for so long. It was not a demand for surrender, but an invitation to build something new together. My father looked up, and for the first time, his eyes met mine without the filter of paternalism. He saw me, Cora, the woman, the leader. He nodded slowly, a single, momentous gesture of acceptance. "All right, Cora," he said, his voice gaining a sliver of its old strength. "Show us the way." A tear slid down my mother's cheek, a tear of relief. Isabel managed a small, tentative smile. Even Ethan, though he didn't smile, uncrossed his arms, a subtle but significant sign of surrender. The ending wasn't a sudden, cinematic reconciliation. It was the beginning of a long, and undoubtedly difficult, process. There were years of misunderstanding to unravel, of habits to unlearn, of respect to be earned on all sides. The family that left that conference room was not the same one that had entered. The old power structure was gone, replaced by a fragile, uncertain, but hopeful new dynamic. As for me, I felt a sense of peace that had nothing to do with market valuations or acquisitions. It was the quiet, profound peace of being fully and truly seen. I had not set out to conquer my family's world, but to create my own. And in a turn of fate I had never anticipated, my world had become big enough to hold them too. The journey ahead was uncertain, but for the first time, it felt like we might just be able to walk it together, not as a patriarch and his disappointing daughter, but as a family, finally stepping into the light.